I think that's going to be pretty much everybody. So we will make a start and I will formally say hello to everybody and welcome to our webinar today. Inside the Case Classroom, Insights from Award-Winning Teacher with Joerg Niessing. So I'm Kate Cook from the Case Centre and I'm going to be your host today. Some of you will already know that the Case Centre is a non-for-profit organisation and a charity, and our mission is to advance and support the case method worldwide. We do this in a number of different ways, but includes running this webinar programme, which we run throughout the year. And we're delighted for today that we've been joined by Joerg. Joerg is a senior affiliate professor of marketing at INSEAD and a globally recognised expert on digital strategy. He teaches executives and MBA students on digital transformation, brand management, data analytics, and customer intelligence, as well as being the author of the book, The Definitive Guide to B2B Digital Transformation. For us, importantly, he's also an award-winning case teacher, having won our Outstanding Case Teaching competition this year. He's also published more than 25 academic cases and won numerous awards with his cases as well, cases such as Waterdrop and BMW Startup Garage. He also regularly appears in our top 50 best-selling case author list. So before I hand over to him, there are just a few housekeeping points that I need to run through. We will be asking you to use the chat to ask all your questions, to make any comments. So please do that. We do want you to contribute to this session. To ensure that the chat does run smoothly, please make sure your comments are focused and post them to everybody, not just the panelists. It's just easier to follow the conversation that way. We are recording the webinar and you will receive a link in the follow-up email, which we will send out first thing next week. There are also closed captions available for this session, so if you would like to use them, you can turn them on using the captions button below or through the more button, which is also below. The captions are only in English at the moment. So it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Joerg. I don't know whether, Joerg, there's anything else that you would like to add, and have a great session.
No, thank you very much, Katie, Antoinette, and all your colleagues at the Case Center for setting this up. I think this is amazing. Very nice to be here and keep it also as an interactive session. We have lots of time for questions later. No, happy to dive in. Maybe one last comment, as you will see later as well. I started my career in academia, then also spent lots of time in the business world, and then 2013 back to academia, which also helped me a lot when writing cases, when teaching cases, of course. So I will talk about this later. But no, let's dive in.
Fantastic. Well, maybe if we get started on the first topic that we wanted to cover today, and that's the key factors that contribute to successful case teaching. So in your experience, are there any non-negotiables that make a case session truly work?
Yeah, so I mean, the first and most important thing is really, I always think about the preparation of the class, right? So that's sometimes I realize maybe when I started teaching cases, I didn't take the time needed. I mean, maybe some of this sounds obvious for some people here in the room that are experienced case teachers. But, are we really clear on the learning objective? Do we really know what we want to bring across, right? And by this, I do not only mean something, for example, I teach now very often understand how data and I can support building powerful customer experiences or business model. I mean, that's very high level, right? So, but I sit down, I think about, okay, how can I break this down? What are the key points I want to bring across? How do I link it to the case? How do I link it to other supporting examples and to the frameworks I bring across? So there's really getting a very detailed understanding of the learning objectives, plural, right? So is very important. Yeah.
Fantastic. And can you share an example of a moment when one of those factors made a noticeable difference in one of your classrooms?
Yeah, so I mean, here in particular to this point, I said earlier, I often try to have additional supporting examples to the case, right? A case, of course, can be very powerful to bring across certain frameworks. But I also back to my intro, I teach a lot in executive education, and usually the groups are very diverse, the companies are very different, right? And then when you realize, hey, there's a particular discussion on a specific topic, and you can divert away from the case, support it with additional examples supported what it means in their industry, in their role, based on their seniority level,
Mm.
that actually creates often the aha moment, right? Where people say, ah, now I understand what you had in the case, and now with these supporting examples, I know what I can do in my industry. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose those aha moments are priceless when they happen while you're still in the classroom with them. And then you can kind of, that conversation can carry on rather than having them afterwards, which I'm sure also happens a
A-
lot. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you talked there about particularly with your executive and maybe changing the conversation or changing the teaching plan. How do you decide whether a case is the right fit for a particular group of students or a particular course? I suppose that's two different questions, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are multiple variables I take into consideration. I mean, one, of course, goes back really to the learning fit, right? Does the case really teach what you would like to bring across, right? And then before I also select the case, I carefully think about, and same is actually also true for degree programs, what case actually fits, right? So I have my learning objective. As you said, I wrote almost over 30 cases now myself. I have lots of other examples that are not published. So sometimes I even combine various cases to bring across a learning point I want to make. But then I also carefully think about the people in the room, right? Even in a degree program, even if I teach MBAs, I look at, hey, which companies did they come from? Is there a mix to a specific region? Is there a mix? Is there a tendency to a specific background? At INSEAD, we have lots of finance people that come, right? So, I mean, in general, you could say, okay, if I look at executives, they need also then a case where I can have a discussion about application. How do they apply that in their roles, right? Some cases are better than others. If I think about MBAs, they often look for this analytical rigor, right? The analytical stretch. Some cases work better. Undergrads maybe need more clarity and structure, right? So you have this high level, but then of course, in particular in executive education, you even have to go a level deeper, right? Within that group. I mean, I have sometimes audiences with extreme part. I had 40 Dutch executives from finance, right?
Mm.
And then sometimes you have people that are doing marketing execution while I teach the same case, for example, water drop you mentioned earlier.
Mm.
So, but you have to really dive deeper. I look at the titles, where do they come from, and then really make sure the case fits. And if it's not one of my cases, of course, I use many other great cases that are out there.
So just a follow-up question for me about that. Is that case fit something you take into consideration when you're writing your own cases? Do you consider the audience at that point, or do you look first at the company and the decision and then make that fit the audience, or is it the other way around?
That's a very interesting question. So first, I look at I mean I teach also branding, so brand portfolio management, right?
Yeah.
I look at my own portfolio. I mean, many executives reach out to me after a class, hey, can we write a case?
Mm.
And then I'm like, oh, I already have two cases on the topic, right? So
Right,
I
yeah.
try to look at what are all the topics I would like to teach.
Mm.
So that is important for me. Does it fit into my portfolio? And then when it comes to the audience, let's say to the seniority or a potential a regional focus,
Mhm.
and maybe we dive deeper into case writing if there's interest from the group.
Yeah.
When I write a case, I think about, or I want to make sure I can use that case for various audiences, right?
Wow.
I mean, my Majid Al-Futam case is a very good example on this, right? So sometimes I really talk just about the cultural change in an organization. So when I teach C-level executives, but then we can, in this case, also move into the technical details of how to build a proper data strategy, right? So where a C-level executive would say, "Hey, I need the 10,000 foot level view," while
Mhm.
somebody at the ground integrating various data sources looks at it differently, right? So
Oh,
I write it, can I use it for various levels? Can I use it in various regions? And how would I adapt depending on the people that are sitting in the room?
I think that's a really important point, though, that um, you've got to, as a case writer, but also as a case teacher, look at all of the cases you use as a kind of catalogue, whether you've written them yourself or not, so that you're also not predictable to the students, or that you've considered other things that are important, like diversity, and or geographical location. So that's a really key takeaway, I think, already, which is, to think of yourself as almost the library manager when you're thinking about using cases. So, have you ever actually kind of misjudged a case student fit, and how did that teach you anything, or how was that challenge, or have you always got it spot on?
Yeah, it happened. Of course, also comes with experience, right?
Yeah.
If I remember initially when people start, and I see it also now, if I help younger colleagues, let's say making the transition into executive education or into case teaching in general. Initially, it happened to me as well. You focus on the cases you love, right? You focus on
Right.
the cases you really like. And you maybe overlook what I said earlier, like, have I really understood the group and what I bring across? And again, this is in particular, it's a beginning where lots of preparation is needed. And then it happens because you stick to what you're used to, right? And I mean, in particular in today's world, and you know it at the case center, there's so many great cases. But I have my own agent in Notebook LM programmed that is analyzing all the cases that are published and gives me a good summary, compares it to my cases, and then it tells me, Jörg, there are two new cases you maybe want to look into. It's
Mhm.
easy today, right? To look outside and make sure you have the right case. But of course, it still happens. And then maybe second point in executive education, I don't know if there are many people in executive education also here listening. That's where it's sometimes also difficult because of the diversity of a group, right? Where you maybe look at the group and you talk to the HR team and they say, "Hey, Jörg, we need something on a specific topic," and then you realize, hey, the topic that I pulled myself into, and depending on the people that were then in the classroom, wasn't maybe the best. I didn't pick the best case for that group. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's hope that everybody in the audience picks the right case. They've got that ready. Um, Maybe then we can move into talking through about preparation for a case session, and maybe in the classroom some of the common challenges that I'm sure everybody has had at some point. There is a poll which asks about the most difficult things when preparing for a case session. I wonder whether it would be a good idea to launch it and hear from the audience. Let's have a go.
Yeah.
So I'll just launch this poll then, and if you pick, I'll leave it open for another minute or two to make sure everybody has a chance to participate. And then maybe we can talk a little bit around any advice that you've got for the audience, but also thinking sort
Yeah.
of challenges you might have had that you've managed to overcome and how you've overcome them. So we'll just leave that open just till we've got a little bit more participation. Let's have a look. I like to get up to 75% participation, so really. Just ask her for more.
Yeah, it tells me I cannot vote.
Ah, shame.
Maybe because they are all potential challenges. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Right, I think I'll end the poll. We've given it long enough. We'll have a look at the results.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And I wonder how many people would have actually wanted to pick more than one, because I did make that one single choice to find the most difficult thing.
Yeah. But it's good to
Um,
see that identifying the key learning objectives is not the highest,
mhm.
which we just touched on. No, designing the discussion flow, that's a really important one, right? I call it this discussion arc. So that's where I usually think about 5 stages, right? So a good day case discussion. I mean, you want to create this curiosity, right? So at the beginning, maybe even then in the second step, that where I say confusion, complexity, right? So that people really, yeah. yeah, think like the protagonist in the case, right? And then you have the tension, the discussion, and then you move into insights and resolution. I mean, if I take what's a good example? Yeah, maybe my water drop case and my Telenor case. It also won awards, I think, at one point. If I take that case of Telenor, telecommunication company moving into banking, right? In Serbia, where we start with this, hey, should they do it? Telecommunication company, right? The curiosity. People already like, in particular, the financial people. Oh, why should they do it, right? You have then in the second stage, you discuss the conflicting data that we provided in the case. Does it make sense? What are the pros? What are the cons, right? And then, of course, you have this tension and it goes to the decision dilemma, right? So how, okay, we now want to do this, but how do we do it? What's the business model we want to use, right? And then you bring in your frameworks. So I think this discussion arc is really important. And by the way, that's also what I realized sometimes when I don't use my own cases in teaching note. Maybe that comes a little bit short in many teaching notes I see, right? So they talk about the board plans, etc. often, but really having this conflicting, sometimes confusing perspectives. That I think is an important step in this discussion arc. Yeah,
And so actually maybe that because there's a small percentage there that find no, a larger percentage that find anticipating student reactions. So maybe it's actually about getting comfortable that there are going to be different perspectives in the classroom. There always should be, and you should encourage them. And then it's about how you manage them rather than worry about there being, you know, uh, student reactions that maybe disagree with each other.
absolutely. And that's maybe also that comes by most likely by experience a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
back to what you said earlier, the successful factors. Or what makes a successful case teaching.
Mm,
I call it the 80-20 of case teaching. 80% is preparation, 20% is improvisation. Maybe, I mean, we use the 80-20 buzzword, but maybe it's even 60-40. Right.
mm,
So that goes back to my earlier point. But I think that comes with experience, right? So, I mean, as we know, are people that do lots of case teaching, you are less a teacher. You are actually more a moderator, right? So, and I think it's that's also another very important skill, which I also learned over the years, carefully listening, connecting the dots, right? Even like sometimes simple stuff like in an executive class where you maybe even don't know the names, right? Maybe there are name tags, maybe not. But hey, remember what Peter said 50 minutes ago, right? So how do you connect all these discussion points to make them feel part of the solution you are deriving, right? And this improvisation, also back to my earlier point, adding additional examples, adding additional insights from the experiences you maybe have made in other classes. That, of course, helps a lot with getting the right answers or good guidance for unanticipated questions, right? But they always come, right? I mean, they come in every session, and the more you do, the more you most likely get used to it.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very true. But I mean, that's also part of the fun for you as a faculty member is that you know that each class will be slightly different. You might have used the case for a number of years and there's still a new comment that you've never heard before. And that's part of the
Absolutely.
fun for faculty.
No, absolutely. Maybe one last point on this. Often I'm also saying, hey, I don't know yet, but
Mm.
fantastic question. I will dive into this, right? I will look into this. It's not that we have to have all the answers all the time, right? So, and I think that's absolutely fine to say that as well.
And I think that getting students used to that, and that's just replicating the workplace, isn't it? I mean, we all have those meetings where we don't have those answers, and we need to get back to people. So that's just teaching them some more soft skills. So that's brilliant. So, I mean, INSEAD are blessed with brilliant students. But in terms of challenges, which challenges in case classrooms in particular do you see cropping up? Maybe regardless of, or maybe because of class size or discipline, or and do you have any strategies that you've used or can recommend to people maybe who are a little bit newer to case teaching?
Yeah, so one of the key challenges I'm facing is more or less time management,
Mm.
right? I'm pretty sure many here on the call maybe face the same. But that's also back to the preparation part, right? So where I'm saying, I know sometimes I talk to colleagues that say, hey, I don't do lots of teaching, and if I teach, I have my plan and that's it, and I have to go through that plan, right? And then you start maybe also back to my earlier point, not carefully listening anymore to the people, right? So what I do is really I always say I think about the time I need for this what I have in mind, and then I cut it in half. And I say, okay, I cut it in half because I might have a very talkative group. And then I fill the half I cut it with things at various stages that I do not need to cover,
Right.
right? So let's say, right now I'm writing a new case. Actually, you don't even know, or maybe you know, it's a case center about Decathlon and their sustainable AI-driven business models, right? So it will be a very rich case where you could dive deeper into other topics like, okay, let us decompose the customer journey. Let's find out where we can use technology and where not. It's a nice add-on, right? Where I say, okay, I cut it out. It's not the main part of the discussion. The main part of the discussion is how do I create sustainable, relevant business models. But if I see I have time, I can adjust. Then I throw these extra things in. Or also, I often use cases. That's another nice way of doing things. That I have lots of supporting materials. I mean, my cases usually have like videos with the protagonists, right? Like my BMW case has, I think, 35 supporting videos, right? So it's also good to then say you can throw these in if needed, right? If I need to fill time or I can cut them out instead of showing the 2-minute video, I give the 10-second summary, right? So that's where you can maybe play a little bit with the time management. But I think it's very important to say this is what I want to cover and this is a nice to have in each section. Yeah. I mean yeah, that's maybe one of the key barriers I was facing in the past.
And I think important to kind of mention at this point that if you're not using your own case, if you're purchasing a case, then make sure you thoroughly read the teaching note that the author's produced. Because
Yeah,
even though you might have your own learning objectives
yeah,
or and your own questions on classroom management, they
yeah.
will always hopefully have included some of this background and supplementary materials, hopefully.
And
It's good teaching.
and by the way, that also helps. I don't know if that's a problem for some people in the room, depends also on the culture.
Mhm.
Sometimes you like sitting there and you say, "Oh, I have a very quiet group today," right? Very quiet group. And then it also helps to trigger the discussion, right? You show some of these supporting materials, you show the protagonist on a specific questions, you throw in another polling exercise right after, right? A Mentimeter, whatever. And then based on that, you do some cold calling based on what you see on the screen. So that usually works quite well also with very quiet groups. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very much. So how long are case classes at INSEAD? Do you have a standard length?
In the degree program, it's 90 minutes. In executive education, from two, right? So
Right.
sometimes, again, it's literally as short as 30 minutes. Sometimes we have these companies that want whatever. They love the examples, but they
Mm,
don't want to read stuff and
yeah.
they want to have more an inspirational session. So sometimes I do some of my cases in literally 20 to 30 minutes.
Wow.
But sometimes, like back to the Majid Al Futam case or the water drop case, they could easily fill a day. They could
Yeah.
quickly fill a day. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your preferred length?
My preferred length in executive education is 4 hours, right? But then it's also really not just the case itself. Back to my earlier point, I'm building now lots of things around it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, then it's 4 hours. In when I taught lots of MBA classes, it was a classical 90 minutes. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So just kind of moving on about because we touched on very lightly there about using your own cases. So what do you see as the advantage of using your own cases within the classroom?
For me, the one thing is really authenticity, right? So, you know. That's also, by the way, now initially I didn't do this, but if I write a case, it's my first question to the organization is, are you fine putting yourself in front of a camera and I upload this on YouTube?
Right.
Right? So, I mean, today people don't want, and you know this at the case center, these classical cases we have written 10 years ago,
Mm.
right? So they need to be interactive, they need to be flexible, back to my earlier point. And the big advantage of writing your own cases is really you, if they agree to this, you know the company better than every large language model, right? You have insights that maybe nobody else can find on Google or ChatGPT. And I think that makes you also then more credible in the classroom, right? If you really understood the company, if you can then also tell the story of the protagonist in such a different way, right? So it helps you with the storytelling then, of course. And of course, back to my earlier point, another key advantage is you can really align it with your learning goals, right? I think that is very important. Yeah, these are the three main advantages for me.
And is there ever, or have you ever seen even, there must be a real balance to strike then between knowing the case material almost too much, like you know where you want that discussion to go, and students not necessarily um, being therefore having the space in the room to discover new insights for themselves. Is there ever that sort of conflict when you write your own cases or use your own cases, or do you not find that a problem?
No, not necessarily, because I think it goes back to the point before. Really being a moderator, right? Not doing some whatever PowerPoint karaoke where you enforce the solution to them. I mean, I even wrote a case on INSEAD, right? So at one point, and having a discussion how INSEAD is being perceived against. I wouldn't call them competitors, right? I call them partners, the other universities. No, but you get the point. Of course, even there you might be biased because you work at INSEAD. No, but for me, it's about again, what's the learning objective? In that case, it's about marketing analytics. It's about teaching how a conjoint, a discrete choice model really works, and how you can use it, and how you can do it quickly, right? So, and you really moderate the discussion based on the facts that are in the case, right? So I no, I didn't see that I was. Getting off track because I
Mm.
was so much into the company. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. So you mentioned there that your role in the case classroom, which might be different to other styles of teaching, is as the moderator. And I think for some people new to case teaching, that's sometimes quite a hard role to step into because it is different to lecturing, or some of the other teaching methodologies. Are there just two or three things that you think make that they must bear in mind or make for a good moderator, a good case facilitator that might be different to some of their other styles of teaching?
Yeah, I think for me, the number one thing is really be a good listener,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So that is,
a good life lesson, Jörg.
it's very, no, but it's very difficult. I mean, we all know
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
But being a really good listener, and of course, now we could go back to board plans, whether we like it or not, right? Whether they are still relevant or not. But yeah, really digesting all the comments, and of course, also creating this psychological safety up front. Of course, everyone knows that we have to do it, and we do it, right? And there is no dumb question and things like this.
mhm,
And of course, using the tools we have at hand, whether it's AI tools or polling tools,
mhm.
that can help with this. But again, being a good listener is for me very critical. And even if somebody is new to case teaching, really moderating, building that discussion based on what's being said, that should help a lot then. Yeah. Instead of, hey, here's my plan. I prepared so much and I want to go through this plan and I cannot look to the left or to the right. That
Yeah,
is barely working.
yeah, no, yeah, that's true. And is there any preparation that you do or that you ask your students to do specifically to start case teaching? I suppose maybe in INSEAD they come with the expectation of cases. But is there anything in particular that you need students to do to prepare themselves to be to fully immerse themselves in the learning of a case classroom?
Yeah, no, I mean, that of course depends also on the group, right? So
Right.
of course in MBA teaching they have to read the case and they have to do questions. So when I taught MBAs, I always had a questionnaire, right? And it's not about I tell them it's I mean, you don't tell them directly that you don't grade it, but um, it's really for read the case, right? That's why I do the questionnaire, right? Because you don't, in a 90-minute setup, you don't want to lose time, right? Then, of course, sometimes you have, again, C-level executives, they have a hard time to read things, but also here, back to our tools. I mean, you just do a quick podcast, notebook LM, you upload your case, and you have a 2-minute podcast version. I mean, it's very easy today, right? So nobody can say I didn't have time to listen 2 minutes to that podcast version of your case. I mean, I think that is the most important thing. I often in executive classes, I already tell them up front, think about while you read it, while you listen to that podcast, how do you want to apply it, right? I think that is, by the way, very important in exec that you really think about constantly, because that's how they think about it. How do I apply it tomorrow, right? An MBA student might say, let me write it down, and I might use it in a year, right? While the executive will say, I want to use it tomorrow. So that's also to encourage them already up front. Hey, you have this case, but the case is here to teach certain frameworks. And your job is it to apply to your own world. And that's where I tell them sometimes while you read it, think about your company. Think about that's maybe the only thing I ask them. Yeah, otherwise, it's maybe just too much preparation.
Yeah, and they just won't. So you just talked there about the theoretical frameworks. I know that you've developed a framework for what makes a great teaching case. So could you kind of talk us through some of the core ideas behind that and share that with us?
Yeah, no, happy to. Let me see here how I share my screen, and I don't. I mean, of course, I would be a bad marketeer, right, if I wouldn't talk about it. But also, by the way, first of all, also credit here to Siddharth Vadera, who I'm working with on this. You know, at one point, Siddharth and I we talked about this, and we said, hey, because he's also doing lots of cases. Can we help the community and summarize a little bit what makes a good case? And we are working on a framework, yeah, to help maybe people like in the audience. And now you will see my beautifully Gen AI generated slide, right? So back to the Gen AI tools. You see my screen, yeah.
Yeah, great.
And at one point, again, many case writers here in the room that are experienced writers, they most likely say, yeah, makes sense, right? But this is also based on interviews we are doing. We are analyzing colleagues or doing interviews with colleagues and analyzing the data. And we call it the Impact Plus framework, right? So, I mean, the idea was coming a little bit out of it. People ask me, Jörg, you won this award, and 3 or 4 cases won awards as well. But then you look at it and you know it better than myself. Only less than 10% achieve meaningful adoption, and only less than 1% actually win awards, right? And then we looked into the data, and yeah, we said, okay, this impact framework summarizes it fairly well, right? This immersive narrative, meaningful dilemma, pedagogical precision, authentic context, character development, teaching excellence, and then what we call the enhanced success multipliers. I mean, high level, it maybe people say, oh, yeah, makes sense. But of course, we go very deep, right? If I would go even deeper, we have in total 35 pillars, if you will, right? Under each of the letters, if you will, you see now only again 18 out of the 35. So the most important things, right? So, and that is, of course, these are lots of things, and we are also building a scorecard so that everyone can say, okay, let me go through the case I'm writing and let me maybe run it against the scorecard and let me see if I'm hitting the boxes, Right, of course. I mean, you see what my Gemini tool did here at the end. It says it will be an award-winning case. Of course, that's not what we are promising here. So I need to go back to my prompt. But we really realize in our discussions and interviews and looking at award-winning cases that many of these hit many of these boxes. I don't want to go through one by one here, but also, if you look at the teaching excellence, I mean, what I think is really important is this comprehensive teaching node, right? And I saw a comment earlier in the chat, video cases, right? So also here now, where I use or where I provide in my cases additional materials, again, can be easily created by AI today. That it is really easy for my colleagues all around the globe to teach this case properly, right? So, and that's what we are working on. Again, thanks to Siddharth as well here, and hopefully we publish an article soon about this. I mean, feel free to connect on LinkedIn if you want to follow the development here. That article is hopefully being published soon, and then hopefully the book. Yeah, a book takes a little bit more time, but at one point you see there's so many variables coming in, and we said, hey, we have to literally put it into a book for the community because there are so many case writers out there, and maybe it's not just for case writers, maybe it's for everyone who needs yeah, some insights into good storytelling, right? So absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So those 18 are kind of the most important out of the 30 odd. But is there any in particular, maybe one or two, can I push you on to see if there's any that has the biggest impact on how well a case actually performs in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, so the one I would go back to is the teaching note, right? Interestingly,
Hmm.
um, because I realized this, right, with my BMW case. If I go back to the BMW case, who actually won an award, sometimes I was reading it myself again, and I was like, it's not that easy to understand, right?
Right.
Because it was this new venture client model. But I think of the very comprehensive teaching note where people said, "Oh, Jörg, this is so easy to adapt," and all the videos of the protagonist Gregor Gimme made it so easy to teach that case, right? I could teach a case without even reading the case, right? So that's why I would say the T. Teaching excellence, and then all the good things you can provide on top of it, whether again I provide usually my questions that case teachers should ask up front, right? I provide, as I said, Gen AI created summaries. I provide the Mentimeter polls I use during that case, so that it's really easy to adapt. I mean, if you would ask me for another one, I think, I mean, they're all somewhat important. But it's really also this meaningful dilemma, right? So sometimes there are cases out there where I'm like, yeah, it's a nice story, but can you really create the discussion in the room you would like to have, right? That you really have people know, I'm for A, I'm for B, I'm for C, right? My Kuoni case is a little bit like this, where we have four options, and all four options could be good, right? And I think that is important as well, if you would ask me, really having this meaningful dilemma.
And is there follow-up question that kind of does obviously also impact case writing? Is there an ideal length of case for you? Both either in terms of what you like to write, but then also that you know in the classroom is going to be that the students will engage well with. Do you have a minimum, maximum pages over the years of experience?
Yeah, no, that's definitely going down, right? So
Yeah.
people don't have time. I mean, that is clear. I mean, also back if I open some of the comments again, back to video summaries and so on. I mean, people don't want to read, right? They want to listen to that podcast 2 minutes on the bus. You know, I try to keep it very short. The Decathlon case I told you earlier will be very complex, but right now we have it at 8 pages, 8, 9 pages. It's not finalized yet, but we even try to get it down to 6, right? The teaching note, on the other hand, I mean, I also don't want to make it too long because faculty wants to read it. But on the other hand, I'm also saying, hey, again, back to teaching excellence in our impact framework. If you don't provide the information to really create a good discussion, then you have a problem as well, right? So teaching, my BMW teaching note, I think is 45 pages, if I remember correctly. But at the end, people said, no, this makes it easy to teach the case, right? So that's why case, 5 to 8 pages, maybe, if at all, right? Always create a video summary or a podcast summary, and teaching note, no boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just having a look there at your slide, and there's a couple that jump out at me, and maybe that's just my own kind of personal perspective on things. But I've always thought that a case is a story, but it's more than just a story because obviously you've got to have your learning objectives and it's got to have that linked theoretical frameworks because otherwise students will be why bother or you'll be why bother. You've under the enhanced one, you've got the integrate the emotion with the analysis. Do you have any tips on both? Again, it could be case teaching and case writing. Do you have any tips on how you integrate enough emotion, but not too much, because then otherwise it might just become a Disney story? And the same in the classroom. Do you worry about whether your students get over emotionally involved in the topics in the case, or is that actually a benefit for you?
It's okay. I mean,
Okay.
it's definitely okay. My Telenor case was Martin Navratil as the key protagonist. He triggers emotions in the videos that I show, and as long as it's supporting the discussion, I mean, we know again that's maybe where my consulting experience, being having spent over a decade in consulting, helps, right? I mean, because let's face it, that's a reality within organizations as well, right? So when what I said earlier, the discussion arc, we can call it discussion arc supported by emotions. Maybe it's good to have,
Mm.
right? So because that triggers a good debate, right? But of course, you need to control it and you need to make it meaningful, right? So I think that's very important. But emotions without substance also doesn't work, right? So back to, I mean, start with a compelling hook. I mean, yeah, you can, we know this, right? We all know this. Marie looks out of the window and da 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 da, right? So, I mean, yeah, you want to have the storytelling on the one end, but then again, if you have the M missing, the meaningful dilemma, if you have the data missing that supports a good discussion in various directions, emotions alone will not help you, right? So you need a good combination of these.
And just one last point, which actually Manju has just asked as well in the chat about the character development, the C on that slide. I was interested in the create multidimensional protagonists and wondered just a sentence or two about that. In what do you mean by multidimensional?
Yeah, so here, by the way, that's interesting that you point that out. The C for me, if you would ask me maybe what's the least important one, while they are all important,
Hmm.
that's maybe the one,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
But on the other hand, what we mean by this is also a character that you do not read directly, that the solution is not obvious,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So that is very important. That you a little bit when you read the case, that you a little bit in, yeah, in the dust still, right? So that's really the idea here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I think we've got plenty of questions in the chat, so I think we'll go over and work through some of those questions if that's all right with you, Jörg. Now, Kinjal has asked, do you allow students to use AI during the case study discussion at all?
Absolutely, King Jal, right? So, I mean, maybe that's where I'm also a little bit different than others. Um, of course, again, back to my earlier point, I do lots of executive education. I actually encourage them even to use it, right? So because that's the new world we live in. Let's face it, it's my perspective. Maybe in a degree program it's different. Also, when a case plays a big role in grading. But at the end of the day, we need to learn as participants, students today, how to leverage these tools with knowing, of course, with knowing the disadvantages of them. But I allow them to use it. Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of your MBAs, because this question is less relevant for the exec audience, how many case studies per semester for students to work on. So maybe you might know how many you like to put into a semester, but do you also know how many they're dealing with generally across the whole program?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, at INSEAD we heavily driven by cases, right?
Mm.
To put a number on it, I cannot even say, I cannot speak for my colleagues. Let's say if I think about when I was teaching, I stopped MBA teaching more or less in 2019. But if I think about, I still do an executive MBA. So if I think about my classical brand management class, um, 16 sessions, I more or less had 10, 12 cases, right? Some were filling a double session, some just a single session. Because again, the beauty for me is this experiential learning, right? It's not, I mean, it's really experiential learning. And as we all know, the 70, 20, 10% rule, right? How do we remember things? 70% is on the job. And maybe case education falls into this because if it's a good case, it feels like being on the job. Right? That's why I use them a lot still and will, right? But again, don't forget what I said earlier. I also support it with many other examples, right? That I built over the years, right? So again, today you read something. Again, it's so easy to create one or two slides today, as I just was showing you. The slide generated in 1 minute by uploading our executive summary. It's easy today, right? And that's if you count these examples as mini cases as well, I mean, then it's a lot. Yeah,
And between the case and those other mini examples or that kind of teaching strategy, that's where you can make sure that you're integrating the theoretical elements as well as you work through that course. So that's great.
absolutely.
Um, so how do you adapt to the classroom when you realise the students have really not prepared the case properly? Do you ever, well, with execs, you say you actually don't get them to prepare too much up front. Do you have anything maybe when you started case teaching that the students, I think this might be a more common question in other institutions outside of INSEAD, for example.
Yeah, this is in particular a problem with in MBA teaching,
Mm,
right? So, if I realize it doesn't work, I throw in a couple of videos, right, from my cases. Again, where I throw in more nuggets.
mm,
Let's say, for example, in the BMW case, I asked also Gregor Gimme himself. The main case idea is this venture client model to give a short summary of how he would describe it. Right? That is a video I can use more like a 1 minute case summary, if you will,
yeah.
to show. Right? If I see up front, hey, people didn't prepare, I can show this. Right? What often also works very well, and if you don't have lots of time, like in an executive education setup where you have 4 hours, I do this classical, hey, talk to your peer, 2 minutes, right? So small groups in the classroom, two or three people, and usually one has at least skimmed the case, right? And then that person brings the others on page, and without making feeling them uncomfortable, right? So I try to avoid that, right? Because in particular, also in executive education, I mean, people are busy, but even in MBA education, of course, at INSEAD, we force sometimes our people to prepare. But it happens that they don't, and then you don't want to put them necessarily on the spot in front of an 80 people class. So I give this 1, 2 minute, hey, talk to your peer, discuss the key findings, and then they are on the same page. And usually, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Christoph has asked, does the level of detail of the discussion in the class depend on the case or on the facilitation alone?
That's a good point. I think both, right?
Mm.
So both, because at the end, back to my earlier point, there are points with every case, and that goes back to what do you want to bring across a learning objective? There are points I want to bring across, right? And whether they come from them or whether I need to trigger more, right? That's the improvisation we talked about earlier. That's where, with smart questions, If you see the discussion is not going to that point where you would like to have it, you throw in these nuggets, right? There are these points. Every case I'm saying, okay, if I don't cover this, then it will be not a good class, right? So, and that's often can come from the discussion itself. But if it doesn't, you need to, back to my earlier point, you have to build in your preparation the additional nuggets you want to give to make sure you get to these points. Yeah.
Yeah, the kind of sparks that
Yeah.
can, yeah. Um, another question again. How do you grade your students, or do you grade your students from the case classes? And do you have a rubrics or anything that you use for that?
Yeah. So back to executive education, most likely not.
Yeah.
I don't grade them, right? Um, you know, I'm always, it's interesting grading. I mean, for me, I could argue in MBA teaching, I understand that. In executive education, I'm always saying we're here to learn, and hopefully you get things out of this discussion. And if not, then we have a problem, and maybe, yeah, you have a problem. So grading, I do this classical letter to yourself exercise with executives, right? So what's the one thing you do next week based on the case discussion? What's the one thing you do in 3 months? And what's the one thing you do within a year? Right. And usually my experience is they come up with great ideas,
Mm,
right? And then, I mean, you could say, okay, then it's for me, it feels good. For them, it feels good. That means they had fun in the discussion. They learned something. And you would say, if I would grade executives, whoever writes down good things, you most likely deserved a better mark. In MBA teaching, yeah. I mean, when I did this, of course, it's not just the quantity of participation, it's quantity, quality. The survey I mentioned earlier, right? They are quiet students, you have them, but then if you see they answer the preparation questions in such a depth where you're like, wow, this is great. Of course, today that's maybe back to the other question. We can all use AI to do so. But you still realize if somebody really thought about it or whether it's an AI generated answer. Because as we know, AIs are just averages, right? So let's not forget about this. So that's what I did when I did MBA teaching, right? So I looked at the commons, I looked at body language, stuff like this. And luckily, also, I was mostly teaching electives, so the class was sizable, right? So it's not that I taught the marketing core of 100 people. Yeah. So it was easier.
and you mentioned those kind of preparation questions, the kind of questionnaire that you send out. Do you have some standard questions, or are they different per case? Kind of depends.
No, no, different per case and different per audience.
Right, okay.
Right. So again, if I teach the BMW case, again, is a good example. You can teach it to finance executives because it's about the venture client model. You can teach it to marketeers because at the end, it's about customer-centric solutions. Right. So, and back to my earlier point, when I write cases, like with that case, I think about it. How do I teach it to finance people? How do I teach it to marketing people? How do I teach it to strategy people? And then the questions are different. Yeah. Even
And
for the same case. Yeah.
right, yeah. So yeah, just really think about the class. Yeah, fantastic. There's just a case writing question, which I think we've just got time for. It's from Ravish, who says that it's very difficult to find a company who will give us permission to write a case study in India. Do you have any suggestions for him?
Yeah. No, that's a tricky one. Usually it's a mindset problem, right? So, with Decathlon or any other examples, I'm saying, hey, if it's an award-winning case at one point, you might be the lucky company that 30,000 students per year get their hands on and discuss it for 4 years. Sorry, for 4 hours, right? Or longer. Um, so I'm just thinking, I mean, I think we have lots of cases from Indian companies. I know it's tricky, but that's why I literally start with that question, right? And also lots of my students in the executive classroom come with ideas. I don't even look around anymore because I realize, I mean, I'm always saying, yes, there's confidentiality, but in today's world, I mean, I mean, I'm not putting the balance sheet in the teaching note, right? But even that, you most likely can, many of the information that we think is private, it's accessible. I think you need to just get to the right person that sees the benefits of it. I mean, I look at Waterdrop, the case I wrote with a former INSEAD MBA student. I mean, he's giving me every detail of everything. There's no secret. Valuation of the company now, you name it, what they do, how they leverage AI to create marketing content. I mean, they see the value of it. They realize, hey, we are being discussed. We no, I mean, they see it part of their communication, right? So it's I think it's just finding the right person in the company, get their sign off quickly, and that's where we have luckily at INSEAD a good team that is dealing with all the legal behind it. But that would be my recommendation, and you most likely will find these companies that are willing to do so.
And like you say, look at your current students, look at alumni, but also to remember that actually there are some incredibly well-written cases that have been based on published resources. They win awards with us, they're bestsellers. So although you may want to, Avish, start writing a case with field research, switch to desk research if there's a particular story that you wish to tell, and just make sure that any references and any material that you've used are referenced properly within the case study, like any other academic piece of work. We also have on our website, under the training and resource tab, our case knowledge centre. So in there was a lot of resources around teaching and writing, and Antoinette, my colleague, Director of Communications, has written a number of articles on how to persuade companies to join you on this journey. So have a look there as well, because that might be one of those, might be useful for them to see. So I
Yeah,
think probably come to the end in terms of time. So I would just like to say thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today and for contributing so well via the chat. We've had some really interesting
yeah,
questions. And there were a few that we didn't quite get to. But also thank you, Joerg, for sharing all of your years of experience and passion about the case method. That's absolutely fantastic. We can't wait to see the book. That will be brilliant.
yeah,
That would be absolutely fantastic. Um, just on a practical note, there will be a follow-up email that comes out at the start of next week, which will have the webinar recording, and we will also make sure that there's useful resources in there. I'll also include a link to all of your cases in our collection, Joerg. So all of those cases that you've referenced today, they'll be able to take a look at. So that would be fantastic. There will also be a
yeah,
feedback survey appear when we get to the end of this webinar. So if you could complete that for us, that would be fantastic. So thank you very much, everybody.
yeah.
Thanks again, Jörg.
No, thank you very much. And I just saw Joao, you answered the question of John perfectly. So that is the arc. So you're a very good listener. Very good. No, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if I didn't answer your question. Happy to connect. Thank you very much for
Thanks
organizing
very
this,
much,
Kate and
everyone.
Antoinette, and to the Case Center team. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Talk soon. Bye bye.
Bye.